Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and we are back with the DRT, the Dispatchers Roundtable, and this is going to be round 33. But first, as always, a word from our sponsors.
At InDigital, we know the public safety professionals hold themselves to a high standard. In fact, standard doesn't do it justice. In over 25 years working alongside you, carrying millions of calls over our IP networks, your dedication has inspired us. That's why our ESI net goes beyond industry standards, not only I3 compliant, but designed to adapt to future development for a network you can count on when it matters most. Learn more at indigital.net.
Carbine, it's multimedia. You can get text, translate to whatever language, getting away with the legacy equipment and going into a cloud-based solution.
It's the first time in U.S. history that we have an EZNet through cloud-native call handling.
As a police officer, to have the victim go video, that's unheard of.
You're getting upgrades every month, not every year.
To schedule your free Carbine demo, please visit carbine.com/WTT.
If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Oh, yeah. And we are back. It's a little weird, because last week I didn't do a live or anything. Technically I did. I did do one, and but it wasn't like this. It wasn't in this setting or anything. So I almost feel a little rusty. Like, what the hell? It was only a week out. So I'm just old, I guess. There's a lot of stuff that's been going on, man. I'm still recovering from a long ass drive from Florida back here to Indiana, where I reside, and it was pretty interesting. It was filled with Buc-ee's, if you've ever been to a Buc-ee's before, and a bunch of other stuff that was going on. A lot of Disney music and kids talking and yelling and good times. Yes, good times. I'm glad to be back, though. Again, this is the DRT, the Dispatchers Roundtable. This is round 33, and this live broadcast is sponsored by InDigital as well as Carbine. Shout out to patrons, as always, as well as all of you who are currently watching, listening, sharing, and supporting. And speaking of sharing, if you could, please, I would appreciate it. Please share this broadcast on your feed or your favorite dispatch page. Throw in some reactions. The more reactions and everything that we get, and also comments and everything, it ends up working out on the whatever algorithm Facebook is doing now, and all of the other social media platforms out there. So please, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And also, roll call. Where are you watching from, and how are you doing today? So this is going to be good. I'm excited about this conversation. I actually had uh about an hour and a half, I think, conversation with my guest a few weeks ago. We were talking about a bunch of different things, just catching up and stuff. And I had asked if there was a topic at all that she would ever want to talk about, and this was the one that came out. And there's a lot of stuff between her and myself, and I'm sure maybe all of you that you have dealt with in your past, whether it be work and dispatch or police, fire, EMS, or even if you are watching and you are from the general public. A lot of this stuff goes with everyday things because we're all dealing with shit, right? and there's stuff that we need to be aware of, and how do we combat this? So this is going to be good. I'm excited, and we've got Gary Gary Tammy Hill, what's up, guy? Joining in here and watching on FB from Northwest New Jersey. Excellent. Welcome, welcome. And our topic for today is going to be physical response to stress and trauma. And my guest that I'm going to be bringing up here is Sara Pagel, and she is a functional health practitioner with Thin Line Consulting. Yo, yo.
Hello, what's going on, everybody?
Yeah, this is going to be good. And I got your name, your title, and where you work out without biting my tongue. Like I kind of
I
felt it.
know.
I was getting there. I was like, that's a mouthful.
It
Sara
kind of
Pagel,
is.
functional health practitioner with Thin Line Consulting.
Yes, it is kind of a mouthful. That is true. You get an A+ and a high five for the day because
Yes.
I know you're running on like 3 hours of sleep, so you get extra A+ and extra high fives.
Yay. I'm all about that. I'm all about that. Yes. All that time driving and everything else, it just I think it made more white hair come out of my beard. I was like, what? Like I felt it. It was just right. Yeah. Pew, pew, pew. Oh, man. So, how has everything been going?
Fantastic. I was in Denver last week hanging out with some amazing dispatchers talking about the same concepts.
Mhm.
And that was really awesome. And did the Empower panel with 911 Wonder Woman yesterday, which was really cool. I
Yes.
love that we're having this conversation in the industry because I love how we've been talking about the mental health side of things, right? And
Mhm.
how trauma and our mind and it gets impacted by the stuff that we see and we hear in the radio room, mostly here, right? And engage in the radio room. And that's awesome. We need to do that. We need to be talking about mental health and you know, my lane has really become physical health. Oh, Sarah Weston, I adore you. I love you, girl. Um, my lane has really become physical health because of my own journey, which we talked quite a bit about when I was on the podcast. I think like I don't know if it was earlier this year or last year,
Dude,
end of
I'm
last year. I don't
yeah,
remember.
I have episode 457 that's going out later today.
Yeah.
And I've had people reach out and they're like, "Hey, you remember this episode that we did?" And some of the numbers I actually I'm able to remember, and others I'm like, like don't hate me. Like
I don't
there's a
know.
bunch of episodes. Like I remember you, I remember your story. I don't remember the number. But
Yeah, yeah,
yes, I think it was within the last year that we had that episode. But for those who are watching and might be new to you as well and everything, if you could just give kind of a brief background on not only
yeah.
your public safety background, but also kind of your story and some of the stuff that you've dealt with. Because when we were talking on that episode, I thought, damn, like
Yeah.
that's a lot of stuff. But you also overcame a lot of things as well, and it was a big push and also motivator to do everything that
Mhm.
you're doing now.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So I started my career in 2008 at the height of the recession, the last recession we were in. And um I couldn't find a job, so I ended up getting hired at a nonprofit in Northern Kentucky because I live in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Mhm.
And I got a job as a therapist. So I was going into people's homes, working with kids and families where the child was at risk of removal from the home. And my job was to help those families stay together. So I was with them for a short period of time to identify that risk and then create a plan to reduce that risk so that the families could stay together. So I did that for a couple of years. They couldn't bill for me, so I got laid off. And then I moved into the public sector and I was a juvenile probation officer for Hamilton County. And I like to tell people I worked with the gun-toting thugs and I loved it because I did. And I miss my kids. But I kind of worked on the flip side of that where um, I worked with all high-risk kids. They all had felonies, a lot very serious felonies too, gun charges, assaults, uh, breaking and enterings, burglaries, car theft. So some really serious crimes for teenagers.
Mhm.
And so I worked on a specialized team. I would go where the child was removed from the home and already put into residential facilities. So I worked with the facilities. So I had still had access or really had my hand in that mental health side of things. Excuse me. And, but also the criminal side of things. And so I held kids accountable. I held the facilities accountable. And I did that for about 5 years. And there's a whole lot of stories I could tell in that space. Being a second, I've really considered myself kind of a second responder because the juveniles had already been sentenced and, their disposition was already being walked out. I was a part of that disposition. Mm-hmm. And so, so from there, I don't really do well working in a box. And anybody who works for the government, which we all do, right? Understands that working for the government, you're in a box. And so, and I was never going to get promoted in that space, which was fine. I had kind of maximized what I was going to learn and what I could do in that space. And then I moved into dispatch. So I connected with someone who's now in the private sector of the industry, which is really fun. And he was not at the time. And he was very honest with me about what the job entailed. And I was like, I think this is what I want to do. And I think this is what I'm wired to do. So I kind of started over in some ways in my career. And, in my mid-30s, I went into the comm center and dispatched for over 140 different police, fire, and EMS agencies when you kind of break them all down. And answer 911 calls. And I did that for about 2.5 years. And 2020, I like to say, was a banner year for me. I got divorced. I sold a house. I bought a house. I quit my job and I started my own business all in 1 year, which I don't recommend doing because apparently I'm a little cray-cray.
I'm gonna get the freeze frame from this episode afterwards when you're like that. That'll be the picture that I post.
I'm fine with that.
Go ahead.
I give you permission to do that because It's very much a reflection of like me. So yeah, that's a little bit about my background. And then parallel to all of my career space, I got really, really sick in 2016. And that's really ultimately what led me into becoming a functional practitioner today. Some highlights from my story. And in 2016, I was getting up in the morning at like 8, downtown by 9, working till, 2, 3, or 4, coming home, sleeping for 2 to 4 hours, getting up, having dinner, and going back to bed and doing it all over again. And that was my life every single day for a solid 6 months. And then after that, my body really broke. And not to give TMI, but I'm gonna, because I talk about poop all the time. Like I get pictures.
That's how we do it here. So
I mean, it's just like, let's just be real, like real and raw. So I actually had diarrhea for 6 weeks, and my whole body just broke. It was really broken. And I went to the doctor, and bless his heart for all he did and didn't do. He poked my tummy like 3 or 4 times, put me on the worst antibiotic on the market that is known for its neurological side effects, and put me on an antidiarrheal and sent me on my way. And I was like, this isn't helping me. Like, this doesn't, like something's happening in my body and I don't understand. I need someone to teach me. My body is giving me information and I don't understand. And I was really desperate. I was so sick, and I was broken. I was desperate. So I actually onboarded with my own functional practitioner who I'd actually met in 2011. And I didn't onboard with him in 2011 because I wasn't desperate enough, which is just crazy, right? So I onboarded with him in 2016. We ran functional labs. So think pee, poop, blood. And he interpreted them through a functional lens, which is, think dysfunction and function, being working the way that things are supposed to work, right? So he interpreted the data through that, which is what I do now, and discovered a whole bunch of different things. So discovered I had a very serious gluten intolerance, not to the point of like anaphylaxis, but like to the point where I get laid up on my ass for like 24 to 48 hours if I have gluten because of the migraines that it causes. It's crazy.
Oh man.
Yeah, it's pretty miserable. And I My DNA was almost resting, which means that like when your DNA is resting, your DNA produces your cells, and your cells basically run your body. And when your DNA is resting, it's almost like your DNA gets lazy and like doesn't produce the right cells, doesn't clean up the dead cells. Like cells get like, it's like it half-asses things because it just can't do what it's designed to do, right? It's too tired. And so at 30, I was basically told, hey, if we don't change something, you're going to end up with like tumors, cancers, growth, something. Like that's the trajectory you're on. We have to intervene. And if you don't, you're going to continue to decline. And I was like, no, I'm not doing that. Like, that's not my life. I am not going to be 30 with an IBS diagnosis just because my body's giving me information they don't understand. Like, I was also diagnosed with PCOS. I mean, there's a lot of different parts to my story. I was really sick, and it really took until honestly 2020 before a lot of that stuff was not present in my daily life. And I still have flare-ups of things, and I still have like health is a choice, and it's a choice that's based on individual decisions all day, every day that we make. And so I still have to make those choices.
Mhm.
And my body, kind of leaning into this this topic of conversation that we're having today, like I'm a trauma baby. So what does that mean, right? So I was from 0 to 5 in that developmental state, I experienced trauma. I was sexually abused in that stage before my brain could even understand, before I had words, at about 3. And so that shifted my trajectory of growth and development as a whole person, like how my functions work together, my mind and my body, how they connect. It shifted my trajectory to what I call a little trauma baby versus a happy little serotonin baby. So I have a cortisol dominant brain, not a happy little serotonin dominant brain. And so yeah, that's it set me up on a path where, I was constipated as a kid all the time as a kid. I had acne, and I mean my immune system, I would get sick, I'd get strep throat all the time, my nose was running all the time, like my body was just not set up for success because of what had happened back in the beginning. So yeah, so that's a little bit about me. I've had some moments in life, and I really do believe that life happens on life's terms, and you learn skills along the way to heal and to transform those experiences into something really beautiful, which is what I strive to do every day. So
I agree. I fully agree there. There's a lot of stuff that happens in our life, life experience that we're able to um, evolve it into something that'll be good. A lot of
Mhm.
people will hear a story and they'll say, "Damn, I'm sorry that happened." You're like, "Well, thanks, but it has
Mhm.
also led me to do other things. I'm able to talk to
Mhm.
people and help them understand their own body or their own experience, or at least for me, also like in dispatching, things that happened in my past helped me with callers, in certain situations, because I was able to help them better than anybody else would be able to, because they don't have that experience. But then, we start getting into some of these highlights. So some of the things that we're going to be going through today is trauma in the body, the way the body keeps the score, as well as stress and its long-term effects. So let's just jump right into trauma and the body. So, what does this mean exactly, and also what can secondary trauma do to the body? So I had a guest on the podcast a few years back now, Dr. Stephanie Kahn, and we were talking about this portion, and it really made me think about a lot of the stuff that was going on to me in dispatch that I didn't know at the time.
Mhm.
So, for instance, IBS, high blood pressure, anxiety, like all of these different things. At the time, I thought it was just because I was eating bullshit, drinking bullshit, not getting sleep, all of this other stuff, which of course is definitely contributions to all of this. But I didn't realize that there was this secondary trauma. I
Mhm.
didn't really know about this. I didn't realize that the shit I was dealing with on the phone, that I wasn't dealing with on my own with myself, that I was just bearing, that it was starting to affect my body. And
Mhm.
really, again, at the time I was like, oh, I guess I'm just getting old, man. My shit's falling apart. And I'm just getting old. But I didn't put two and two together
Mhm.
that it was because of the stuff that I was doing. Like, we didn't really talk about self-care. We didn't
Mhm.
talk about anything else really, because nobody wanted to look weak. And throughout all of that, we're continuing to make ourselves weak because we're not
Mhm.
dealing with our own shit, right? So
Mhm.
then, I posted this during the session yesterday that you were doing with Sara and such. I posted on there
Mhm.
because because of a lot of things that has happened to me that I've experienced. If you don't listen to your
Mhm.
body will make you listen. And
100% truth.
sometimes that shit is bad. It can be pretty
Yes.
bad, and I'll get to a story a little bit later about that, but I wanna jump into this, and, your thoughts on it as well. What exactly does it mean, the trauma in the body, and also what can secondary trauma do to your body?
Yeah, for sure. So, we are our bodies. I
Mhm,
heard that quote. I wish I could give credit to where I heard that quote. I think it might have been my good friend Melissa, who's um, she's a trauma guru in my community who I
mhm,
absolutely adore. But we really are our bodies, and our mind and our bodies are connected, whether we're tuned in to that connection or not. Whether we validate that connection or not, our mind and our body are connected. And so when something happens in one of those, like in the mind, it impacts the body, and when something happens in the body, it impacts the mind. And so that is kind of like the basis of the body keeps the score, right? So what does that mean? So the body keeps the score is a great title. It's a title of a book. It's a great book, very easy to read, by Bessel van der Kolk. And he really kind of breaks down some of the history of where trauma research kind of started, and then does a good job of just making it easy. It's pretty easy read, um, from like a science or clinical standpoint. It's a very easy read. The stories are not easy because trauma is not easy. Oh, I'm so proud of you, Zach. Good job. Like, I want to high
yeah.
five you. Like,
Yeah, we'll
um,
throw that on there. Zach says, "Just got
yeah,
myself
that
into counseling. It's crazy how it changes you when you hold it all in."
it really is. It hijacks your vitality, and vitality is really like that sense of energy and life that we have, right? Um, yeah. Oh, Zach, I'm so proud of you. Good job. Like, you get an A plus and a high five too. Yeah. Um, so the body keeps a score, right? It's a book by Bessel van der Kolk. I definitely recommend reading it. It's a great like resource that's out there. Um, and yeah, so the mind and the body are, they are deeply connected, and when something happens in one, it affects the other. What was the rest of the question?
What I wanted to know was, what exactly does it mean when we talk about trauma and the body? And then
Yeah,
also, how does secondary trauma, or what does it do to the body? But also, as you're talking about keeping the score in this portion as well, before we got started, we kind of talked about how it's really, the concept is the way we keep that trauma in our body.
yeah,
And, how do you release it? For me,
yeah,
releasing a lot of that was actually just talking about it, sharing
yeah,
stories, which is everything that I do now. It was all based on my own trauma and not wanting others to have to deal with it the way I was dealing with it, or
yeah.
if they are, to be able to learn from my experience and others and know
Mhm,
that it's okay and they're not alone. Like, it's all right to talk
mhm.
about this, which is why
Yeah,
we're having this conversation as well.
exactly, exactly. I love having this conversation. It's so good. Oh, I have so many thoughts too. Like, it's crazy. My brain can. I We could talk for hours and hours and hours about this topic. I could, because it's just like what I do and what I love and what I'm passionate about. But anyways, yeah. So how does the body keep the score? Like, what does trauma look like in the body, and then
Mhm.
secondary trauma? So go ahead and pull up that PowerPoint.
Sure.
I'd love to share with you guys. So I do training in the community. Like I said, I was just in Denver last week. which was so fun. And I'll be back there in September. If you're in Colorado, I have some spots open for this presentation, but so reach out to me. I would love to connect with you if you're in Colorado. But this is, so how does the body keep the score? Well, let's step back from that question and say, well, what happens when the body is under stress, right? So we talk about stress all the time in the context of the dispatch center. Like, we are constantly under stress. We live in chronic stress. So if you participated in the Empower panel, there's a survey that we asked that you kind of take 5 minutes to do, which I can post the link to, or I can get that link to you too, Ricardo, so you can put it out to the community. But it was just amazing how one of the questions, every single person put stress as one of the answers. And so we know that stress is a real thing, but we don't, like, it's such a big word. How do you unpack that word? What does that mean in real life? And how does that impact your daily grind, right? So this is how I describe stress. So it's really the part of our body that is impacted is called the HPA axis. So it stands for the hypothalamus, which is up here in the brain. The hypothalamus talks to the pituitary gland, which really it sends signals to the adrenals that release hormones, right? And so this is what releases cortisol, right? So cortisol can sometimes get a bad rap when we stay in a stressed state, but we actually need cortisol. Cortisol is how we wake up in the morning. Cortisol is what keeps us alive. We like cortisol. We just don't like it pumping 24/7. So it needs a break sometimes. Like, we need to give good old cortisol a break sometimes. So when we think about stress and what happens in your body when the physical response to stress, so the goal, right? So we should be starting in homeostasis, right? We're born hopefully in homeostasis. I was mostly born in homeostasis. And then I had that moment in time when I was in itty bitty that set me into a stressed state at a really important developmental stage. So because of that, my body developed differently down a different pathway. But we're designed to be in homeostasis, right? And I like to think of two zebras, or a little zebra hanging out on Serengeti, right? Like, he's munching on food, talking to his friends, hitting that girl next door up, like, hey, how you doing? Let's procreate, right? So he's living his best life. He has all of his needs are met, right? So he's good to go. He's golden. So that's adaptation or homeostasis, right? Homeostasis. So that's like baseline. So what happens when a stressful thing happens? So lion comes out and the zebra's like, oh shit, I gotta go, right? So the zebra's like, survival, right? Fight or flight gets activated. And he's like, my survival is now being threatened. So the zebra, that's when we go into this acute distress state here in this graph, right? And different things happen in our body, which I'll unpack. But so let's follow the path of the way it should work, right? The way our bodies are designed and supposed to work. So the zebra runs away. The lion gets a gazelle. He's over there. The zebra's like, phew, I get to live another day. I'm good, right? So he goes back to hanging out with his friends, munching on grass, buddy-buddying to the girl next door. He goes back into this amazing adaptive homeostatic space, right? His needs are met. That stressor of the lion was resolved, right? So he goes back into happy space, right? So that's the way our bodies are designed to work, right? We're designed to handle stress. Like, at our core creation of our functions, we are designed to be okay with stress. And we're also designed to come back out of stress, back into this rest and digest state. And so what ends up happening is when you stay in that acute stress, your body is pumping out cortisol, right? And it's telling different functions in your container, right, to do different things. So it shifts the release of cortisol in that stress state. So norepinephrine or epinephrine, or what we like to call adrenaline, gets released, right? That signals up to the brain to say, hey, we have a threat. Mm-hmm. So then that starts the HPA access process, right? Top down. And so when we're in that acute stressed state, our body does different things so that we can survive, right? That is fight or flight. So what happens is we turn off insulin so that we can use sugar, glucose, to run and fight, right? So we have the energy to survive whatever is attacking us, right? So insulin dysregulation can happen, but we want that to happen, right? Like when we have a lion chasing us, we want energy. We need energy to survive. So then another thing that happens is blood and oxygen gets shifted and directed at your heart and your lungs and your brain, because you have to breathe and you need your heart to pump. If those things stop happening, you die, right? So when you're in this stress state, your body shifts these vital functions and the energy that you're producing to support these vital functions, right? When you're in a stress state, do you think that zebra cares about procreating when he's running away from a lion?
I mean, maybe.
The short answer is nope. He doesn't give two shits about the girl next door. He's like,
Yeah,
hope
like,
you survive, bye.
later.
He's like, I don't care. Like, I gotta survive before
I'll hit you up later.
If we're both still around, I'll hit you up when we get back. Bye.
Oh man.
Yeah. So your body doesn't care. When you're in that fight or flight state, it doesn't care about reproducing. It turns off those hormones. Well, it shifts away the production of those hormones because that energy gets shifted to survival, right? And so a really crazy thing about these mechanisms in our body is that it doesn't matter. Your brain and your adrenaline doesn't care if it's a lion chasing you, a car cutting you off, your kid screaming at you, the boss yelling at you or telling you weren't enough, right? It doesn't matter. Your brain sees it all the same. It responds the same to all of it, okay? So that's a lot of information, kind of like this is the way it's supposed to go. So when that distress or that stress gets resolved, the goal and what we should be doing when this is functioning properly goes back into homeostasis. So what does that mean? So the lion gets a gazelle, the zebra comes back, hanging out with his friends, munching on grass, buddying up to the girl next door. So what happens in the body is that energy that shifted to survival shifts back into this homeostatic space. So what that means is the zebra's like, hey, how you doing? Let's procreate. So those hormones, those reproductive hormones, get the energy they need. And this is really that rest and digest state where your body goes back into, okay, I can now heal from any of the damage that happened while I was in that fight or flight. The blood and oxygen starts to shift back to things like your kidneys and your liver and your gallbladder and your spleen and your stomach. And most importantly, this concept of digesting. So rest and digest. So if there's one thing you can take away from this space, it's that when we hit that adrenaline pump, the goal is to resolve that stressor as soon as we can so we don't stay in that space and our bodies can get back into that rest and digest state. And there's a lot of different ways that we can do that, and that's some stuff that I unpack more in trainings when I talk about this. But now go ahead. That's a lot of information.
I was going to say, so comparing this entire scenario minus the procreation part to dispatch,
Hopefully.
yeah. So minus that part, this entire scenario, it makes me think, just sitting there in dispatch when everything is going to shit, when everything is going to hell, that lion is all of the calls that are coming in that you're now having to
Yes.
triage. And some of them you can't get away from. You have to
Mm-mm.
stick with that one because that's all of them are priority one. But when you're triaging through all of them, if
Yes.
it's some domestic with weapons or CPR or something like that, that's your line there. And now
Yes.
you've got these oh shit moments, but of course also
Mhm.
staying calm and everything. Nobody knows that's oh shit. It's all in the back of your head that it's all
You
oh
know.
shit and everything. Right. You know what it is. However, you don't always get that chance to go back into the homeostasis portion of it
Correct.
because it just keeps going and going and going. And as you're going multiple times, by the time you're finally able to get a moment to breathe, your body is already kind of falling apart because
Yes.
you've got a headache now because you've been listening to
Yes.
all these screams or just replaying and everything else. Maybe you
Yep.
haven't eaten yet, or maybe you've been holding on to food in your cheek the whole time.
Yes.
And there's little
Oh my
things that
God,
are
I did
going
this
on
so
from
many
that.
times.
Right. And you're just, chugging coffee or, the energy drink or whatever. And it just keeps
Mhm.
going and going. And
Mhm.
by the time you're done at the end of the day, wow, that is
Yes.
something else. To
It
try to come
really
down
is.
from that, because
Yes.
all of these things are continuous. You don't get to that homeostasis part.
Mm-mm.
I mean, eventually you do, right? But
Mhm.
man, some of those nights it's just going and going, and you're like, damn, it's already going to be the end of the shift. But really,
Yep.
it's only been an hour
Right,
over
exactly.
over multiple calls. So then, what do
Yes.
you do?
Right? And if you're 1 hour into a 12 or 16-hour shift, man,
Yes,
like, whew, you're in for the long haul. And then you do that on repeat. Like
exactly.
4 days in a row, and then overtime on your off days, you
Hmm.
never get the space to come out of that. And so that kind of leads into, okay, so what happens next, right? What happens when you stay in that space? And this was incredible to hear. I mean, yesterday in the Empower panel and just in the conversations that I have with dispatchers, like the amount of chronic illnesses, the amount of diagnoses, the amount of sick time that's needed, because you end up in that exhaustive phase, that collapsed, where your body just can't adapt to the stress anymore. And this is what's called an adaptive reserve. And I
Hmm.
like to think of it as like a tank, right? So, Ricardo, your tank is going to be a different size than my tank because it's based on our genetics. So, your genetic makeup is obviously different than mine. We're individuals, right? So, how long you can stay in that chronic stressed state depends on your genetics. And so,
Hmm.
eventually, if you don't come out of that state and you don't heal from it properly, you end up going into that adaptive, like where the compensatory phase is what it's called. And that's when you're slipping in. That's when you need like energy drinks to stay awake. You start coping with alcohol, nicotine, other things to help numb out the signals that your body is giving you, right? You start eating shit because it makes you feel better. You get a dopamine or a serotonin hit. This is where you can also kind of start seeing people act out like with inappropriate relationships because they're trying to get that dopamine hit. They're trying to feel better, and it doesn't work, or it does for like a hot second, right? And that's that compensatory phase. And then eventually you slip into that exhaustive phase, which is where I was in 2016, where I only had the energy to work my 5 to 7 hours that I could do. And then I had to sleep again. And I can't tell you how many naps I took in my car in between seeing my probation kids out in the community and like how much coffee I drank and energy drink. I mean, I just everything that I could do just to stay awake and participate in my life. And I wasn't participating in my life, like I wasn't able to be a good friend. I wasn't able to be necessarily the kind of wife I wanted to be. I wasn't able to have the hobbies I wanted to do. My whole life was just about surviving and doing what I needed to do to get paid and then like feeling like death hung over the rest of the time. And that's a really good example of that exhaustive phase.
Right. Yeah. And I remember a lot of times when I was in dispatch because the majority of my dispatch time was on midnights. and wasn't
Mhm.
sleeping well. Then I would start dealing with that caffeine crash and
Mhm.
just feeling like hell and stuff. But there would be times where I would go to use the restroom in the bathroom that's within the dispatch center, not down the hall. I would use the one
Mhm.
within the dispatch center, but I wouldn't use the bathroom. I would just simply walk in there and put my head up against the wall and close my eyes for like 5 minutes. I would set a
Mhm.
timer for 5 minutes just for a moment
Mhm.
to collect my thoughts, just listening to the fan. And I can still hear the phones going off, but I'm like, I just need these few minutes, and then I
Yes.
snap out of it, throw some water on my face. I'm like, all right, let's do this shit, and go back,
Yes.
and start hitting it hard again. And Ricardo, you all right? Yeah, 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 I'm all right. Let's do this. Let's keep going. And but
Yep.
then, to go to take off, and I'm sitting in my car, I'm like, fuck. I'm like, no, I'm
Yes.
not all right, but who am I going to talk to? Like, I don't want these guys to think I can't hack it. And
Right.
that was the worst part. That was the
Yeah.
worst part. So again, everything that I do was because I was trying to find an outlet for myself, and because it worked, I felt like, well, let's talk about this shit. I mean, it all started in 2010, and the podcast started in 2013, and it's just been talking and sharing stories and talking. And like Rachel here says, I'm very thankful that our profession is finally dropping the stigma on
Uh-huh.
mental health and realizing it's okay not to be okay, and we need to talk
Mhm.
about it instead of suppressing those feelings. And
Mhm.
I fully agree. It's good,
Mhm.
but there's also, again, a lot of stuff that people don't realize. So all of this secondary trauma causes a
Mhm.
lot of different shit that is going on. So in
Mhm.
2016, I was out of dispatch already for 3 years in 2016, but I was dealing with stuff that was starting to catch up to me that
Mhm.
I didn't know that was really there when I was in dispatch. And when you get out of when you end up moving from dispatch into another part of public safety, or whatever you end up
Mhm.
doing after you leave, a lot of stuff might come back, stuff that you didn't
Yes.
realize was there,
Yep.
especially different pains. Like for myself,
Yep.
shoulder pain, neck pain, and all this other shit that was going on. But in 2016, I had something happen to me where I was working in the private sector of 911, and I was knee deep in the I am 911 movement, sharing stories, reading them, doing
Mhm.
episodes, just going and going and going and going. And I remember going to go talk to a friend on the other side of the building, and it was in a cube farm, so all these different cubes, and I'm standing just about right here. I'm just standing there with my arms on top of the part that was separating everything, and I'm talking to him, and out of nowhere I got a vertigo spell, and everything started spinning, and I almost blacked out. Like everything was
Mhm.
going dark and closing in on me, and I sat down right away. And I remember he stood up and he went, "Dude, are you all right?" I was like, "I don't know what just happened." I said, "I've never had that
Mhm.
happen before. It was out of nowhere." And after a few minutes, I was able to get up, and I was fine. But after that, I would go to the store or wherever, and whenever I would stand by something that was about the same
Huh.
level, it would start to spin again, and I would hold on. I'm like, "What the hell is going on? I don't
Mhm.
understand this." And I went to the doctor, and it took a couple of years for a doctor to finally tell me this, but it was situational anxiety, is what he called it. And basically, what it is whenever I would get to a spot that was it was close, like my body itself was remembering that moment
Mhm.
that I
Yes.
almost went out. So every
Yes.
time I get to a spot like that, my body
Mhm.
would be like, "Oh, here we go."
Mhm.
I've been able to control it now with exercise and eating well,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
a bunch of other things. But man,
Mhm.
that was something that I didn't know, and I believe
Mhm.
it was also coming from a lot of stuff that I experienced in dispatch, is
Mhm.
from secondary trauma and everything that I just
Mhm.
really didn't think about or do anything. And since then, we've been doing all of this. But
Mhm.
that's just one of those things, and stuff that people don't know about, because I mean, we don't really think about it. But what
Mhm.
else? Because we're always taking care of everyone else and not
Mhm.
ourselves, right? It's
Yes.
always about everybody else.
Yes. Yep, totally,
Mhm.
totally. And yeah, I mean, then that really does kind of play into that secondary trauma where like you don't necessarily know what's causing it in the moment. You just know, like, you're experiencing the symptom of it, but not necessarily living in the moment of it.
Mhm.
And that's because the brain really does work hard to protect us from remembering things and from danger. You know, like its job is to protect us.
Right.
Um, one of its jobs, and so yeah, I mean, it, the core of it is when like this stress state um when you don't come out of it, it all that energy that's created, that's really how the body keeps the score. It keeps it in our memories, in our joints, in our gut, in um in our mindset, in our senses, smell, the
It's
things
like
we
a
hear. I mean,
it's like a weird form of deja vu.
kind of, yeah. I mean, it really is. And, you know, my journey in figuring out that I had been sexually abused as a child, I mean, obviously I don't remember that I was 3,
Mhm.
but I started to have panic attacks and flashbacks of things that didn't make any sense. And it was just like my brain was telling me, like, hey, something happened to you. And here's a little bit of context. And then I pursued some avenues to discover more and discovered, like, wow, okay, this is something that is a part of my story. And then I had to go through the healing journey of that. And that's the thing, like, we're exposed to stress all day, every day. That's not going to change. Like, but how we respond to it really can change the impact of it. And Rachel, you asked a really good question about outside factors, and I absolutely can think that outside factors play into a role. I think it's very cyclical, right? So if there's a trauma in the body, the mind is impacted, and if there's a trauma in the mind, the body's impacted, right? And the same is true with our life. So like when we have stress outside of the radio room, we come in at an already stressed state into the radio room, then we just keep building on that stress, and then when we leave the radio room, we go back into our children, our marital issues, our family emergencies, grieving from death. And so all, like, it's just kind of this circle that requires taking the time and energy to build the skills, and not just mental and emotional skills, but physical skills, like learning about your vagus nerve and how to calm down that fight or flight, and learning deep breathing techniques that help to de-stress your chemistry, the biology of the mechanisms that are happening. And nutrition, exercise, getting up and walking is so meaningful. It's so valuable. It makes such an impact. And go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I fully agree with you there as well, because a lot of you who are sitting here watching this is also, I'm gonna end up putting this out as an episode of Within the Trenches podcast too, because this is all stuff that people need to hear. Whether they are from the general public or from public safety, all of us first responders and everything, this stuff definitely helps. But just sitting, now think about it, and I've done this a few times
As I
already.
adjust my posture because I'm
Yes,
sitting funky in my
yes,
corner.
adjusting your posture, or
Yes.
when you're in dispatch or wherever, what do we do a lot of times? We scrunch our shoulders and they're up,
Mhm.
and that tension is right there, and that pain goes
Mhm.
up the sides of the neck and into the
Mhm.
temples and possibly into your eyeballs. And if you
Absolutely.
would
Absolutely.
just rest your shoulders down for a
Yeah.
moment, damn, that takes a lot of that pressure off.
Yes.
And
Yes.
we don't notice it. Like, there's a lot of
Yeah.
times I'll be sitting
You don't even
somewhere.
realize you're doing this.
Right,
And
or
that's
yeah, if you have your phone and you're up and then you put
uh-huh.
it down, your shoulder is
Uh-huh.
possibly still up. There's a lot of
Yeah.
different things. Looking at, so I want to compare here a little bit with Rachel as well as this next part, but the stress and its long-term effects. So what are some of those long-term
Mhm.
effects? So there's risk of heart attack or stroke,
Yeah.
there's memory loss. I know we've all dealt with memory loss, and digestive issues. A lot of this stuff you don't think about. It's like, what?
Yeah, but it's all
Is stress
connected.
really affecting how I,
Mhm.
digest, or also how I, go to the
Yep.
bathroom, all of
Yep.
this things is going on. Sleep problems, depression, and then now,
Mhm.
going back to Rachel, which she has here, and I want to put this up on the screen for those who end up watching this in the replay, and also those who are going to be listening. I want to read this out. But she says, "How often do you think outside factors, i.e., marital
Mhm.
issues, children, family emergencies, or family death, play factors into the stress or trauma of dispatchers, or can it increase how quickly one experiences a mental breakdown?" Now, if we look at that, let's look at that part. How they play factors into the stress and trauma of dispatchers. What are some of the things that happens, whether you have kids or you have nieces or nephews or cousins, whatever, those calls that come in that deal with kids, there's a lot of stuff, in the back of your mind while you're listening to this nightmare that a parent is going through with their child.
Mhm.
You're putting yourself in that place because we're empaths. So that,
Mhm.
to me, that, yeah, it stacks. A lot of that
Absolutely.
plays, factors into what we do in dispatch. I do,
Yes.
however, feel like some of those experiences do help. And the
Mhm.
reason I say that is because I'm a firm believer, again, that some of those calls are meant for us. So, for example,
Mm.
I I took the call when my grandmother passed away. Who would have thought? What are the odds that I'm gonna be the
Yeah.
one on a backup phones in the middle of the night when my
Mhm.
partner gets up, as soon as she's gone, the call that comes next is the phone
Mm.
call from my cousin telling me that our grandmother just passed away.
Yeah.
Now from there, other phone calls that I had taken where people's loved ones or their grandparents passed away, the way I dealt with it, the way it affected me, I was able to help them in a different way than somebody else would who didn't have that little bit of
Mhm.
experience. So
Absolutely.
some of that, that actually does help, at least in my
Mhm.
opinion. I'm just saying, in
Mhm.
my opinion, it does help because it did for me. It might not for
Mhm.
everybody else, of course, but in my situation, at least, it definitely helped. And of course, talking about different things, but man, definitely those long term effects, but also stacking and playing factors in the stress and trauma of
Mhm.
dispatchers. Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's there.
And what you're talking about is this resilience thing,
Mhm.
and also building capacity to handle stress, right? So it's really interesting when I go back into the real world, right? And I talk to people who don't have never had to deal with the kind of stressors that we deal with in the radio room. They get stressed out about little things, and I'm like, that's not a big deal. Like, so it really does. Yes, Gary, Tammy. I'm not sure if it's Gary or Tammy who's chilling, who's checking in with us today. But yes, the ripples, the positive ripples instead of negative tsunamis. It's so true, and that doesn't oftentimes that doesn't just happen. You have to do the work to do that. You have to shift and grow your skill sets. You have to understand the way your individual body holds on to that moment and that experience and that memory. And then you have to do the work of processing it so that you can let go of that energy and then transform the experience into something beautiful that can actually contribute to the success of whatever it is that's happening in your space. So
Mhm.
you're talking about resiliency, you're talking about capacity growth, and yeah, I mean all of that is true. And this is such a great example of how, like, if you just talk about the mental health side of things and you don't talk about the physical side of things, like we're missing the mark by
Mhm.
not talking about what happens in our bodies, because our body really does keep the score. And if we want to heal the front lines, if we want to bring vitality, which is that sense of life, back to the front lines, we have to continue this conversation about what happens in your body, and
Right.
prep and equip you guys with how to successfully navigate those physical things that are happening.
Yeah, there's a reason that our smartwatches, if you have a smartwatch, are telling us, "Hey, it's time to stand up," or
Yes.
"Hey, it's time to breathe."
Yes, yes. Or
Because
hey, your heart rate is over 120. Are you exercising? No, I'm just listening to someone scream at me because their kid got hit by a car or was just shot. You
Right.
know, like, so that's a great example of the physical manifestation of like the trauma that's happening in front of you.
Or take advantage of the fact that your damn consoles move up and down.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a reason that they go through the entire process to see what is the best, even the console, the console
Yeah.
itself,
Yep.
because you have the ability to stand. And let me tell you, that's one of the other things too, that if I could go back and tell myself something, any advice, that would be one of the things too. Like
Mhm.
I did it a handful of times, like literally a
Mhm.
handful of times out of 13 and a half years that I was dispatching. But damn it, if I could go back, I would tell myself, "Hey, stupid, you need to stand up a little
Yeah.
more and at least stand up and sit down. Stand
Yeah.
up and sit down like you're in Catholic church."
Yeah.
I'm Catholic. I know that. If you don't know that, that's what happens. You're like up and
Yeah.
down, knees up and down.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
you you get to worship and you get to work out. But
Yes. Which
I
is good
want to
because those services can go
Oh,
long.
right, yeah. So I wanna read something really quick. So I had put
Mhm.
this out there on social media as well. This was the only one that I was able to capture at the time, because I was jumping in here with you. But, I had the 3 highlight points, and we're gonna get to another part of this here in a moment as we're kinda going towards the wrap up of this, but there is so much that we could talk about as well.
Oh,
This is just the surface, a little bit of the
surface.
surface. But,
Yes.
one of my good friends out of Kentucky, who I'm hoping to see next week, answered the three highlight pieces, which, and I'll just read them again here that we talked about. It was trauma in the body, the way the body keeps score, and stress and its long term effects. So what she had
Mhm.
wrote for each one was your body experiences trauma even when you think it does not.
Yep.
Very true. And then she also says, your body keeps score. It doesn't miss a thing. And you
No.
must fight to be mindful every day to win the battle. It is absolutely possible to win.
Yes.
And the final thing here, she says stress in the long term can creep up on you and manifest in so many different ways. We have to learn to recognize how it affects us. Those of us who have been in the trenches for decades have battle scars. She says, I'm proud of mine. And she goes on to
Mhm.
say, I earned each one. Never forget what they mean to you, where they've directed you in your journey, and the lessons that you've learned.
Mhm. That's beautiful. That is beautiful.
Oh, there she
Yeah.
is there. Down there on the bottom.
Oh, Jeannie?
Yeah,
Oh, I
Jeannie.
love that. I love
Yes.
that.
Yes. She's amazing. I love her. But these were the comments, from her talking about this. And now we get to the last portion of this.
Yeah.
And it is, how do we combat all of this? What do we
Yes.
do? And one of those
Yeah.
first things, of course, is actually taking care of us,
Yes.
because we take care of everyone and we don't always take care of us. And again,
Yes.
if you don't listen to your body is going to make you listen. And
100%.
here's a quick story. And rage
Amber,
rooms.
I love
Amber
you.
Young says rage rooms.
So I
My
have
my
to like
brother-in-law
pause
went to
here.
one. And go ahead.
Amber actually is my former supervisor, and Amber, you
Oh
are
yeah.
also quite awesome. I adore you, and I can't wait to come out and see you. And we just have to get that figured out.
Yeah. So the rage rooms. My brother-in-law went to one once, and I asked him, I was like, "How was it?" He goes, "Dude, I feel great." And I
Yes,
thought,
because
man,
you
I
get
want to
this
try one of those.
energy out of you.
Yes, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So last year I was at the Gulf Coast Conference in Alabama, and I had some shit happen to me. And of course, if you come from dispatch, well, probably any part of public safety, but mostly dispatch, at least in my opinion, and you are EMD certified, you're emergency medical dispatcher. When shit starts happening to your own body, you start EMDing yourself, which is basically the equivalent
Yeah.
to using WebMD, right?
Mhm.
Everything is going crazy. So I started doing that. I was EMDing myself and just going through the motions, saying, does the early bird catches the worm, smiling to see if anything was drooping, like going through the whole thing. And some of the symptoms were stroke symptoms, which I started
Mhm.
freaking out about.
Mhm.
And I end up going to the emergency room, and I ended up being fine. They told me that what it was an anxiety attack or panic attack, and they said, have you ever had one of those before? And I was like, no, obviously, because this whole thing freaked me out. Like I thought that was it. And they said, well, you need to try to figure out your stress levels and things that are going on. And I've changed a lot of different stuff, but I also wish that I could go back, in time and kind of talk to myself in the beginning to kind of deal with a lot of this stuff, because it was the last probably year and a half of dispatch, maybe a couple years in dispatch, that I got into yoga and I got into meditation, and just breathing techniques helped
Yes.
me
Yes.
keep a clear mind and not as
Yes.
stressed while on the phone.
Yes.
Because if you can kind of maybe not fully master it, but at least have a good foundation, the basic concepts of meditation or just breathing techniques, when you're taking a crazy ass fucking call and you're able to keep yourself calm through breathing techniques while still talking to the person, getting the questions
Yep.
that you need, that brain fog is gone. Your
Yep.
your body's not tensed up, and when you're done with the call, you don't feel as messed up
Yes.
as you would before, because
Yes.
you've got all of this that's keeping you calm. It
Mm-hmm.
actually helped. That's one of the things in combating all of this shit that we've been talking about
Mm-hmm.
that does work. And I say that because I've dealt with it myself. But what are some of the other things, Sarah? There's stuff like, of
Yeah.
course, we've got the basic ones like exercise and eating right, but even little
Yeah.
things like putting your smartphone down, a
Yes.
technology detox, right? Or stay
Yes.
the fuck off of social media.
Yes. Tap out of the social media and tap into your real life. Get out of the virtual world. Look at your family in the eyes and be present with them. Go for a walk or a hike. Get involved in something that brings you joy, whether that's knitting or basket weaving. I don't care. Like, do something that brings you life. Like, I love putting together puzzles. I was diagnosed with PTSD in 2014 before I even got into the radio room. And one of the things that I used as a coping skill was putting together puzzles. It's very soothing to my mind. And there's something about the putting the pieces together and figuring it out and making correlations between what pieces go where. That was very soothing. Adult coloring books. I used to do this in the radio room all the time. I'd bring my coloring books, or I'd bring puzzles. Like, there was one night, well, especially when I was going through my divorce, it was really hard. And I had friends in the radio room that would put together puzzles with me and color with me and just be present with me. And that was a great way to just be present with me when they didn't understand what was going on. They just knew I wasn't okay. But so those are some practical things for the mind. But when you talk about the body and calming down that your nervous system that is responding, right? So breathing really does calm your nervous system down. So deep breathing, as well as activating your vagus nerve. Legos is such a great idea. That is really great
Cool.
idea
Yeah.
at the desk. I hadn't thought about that one, but that's a really good idea. But your vagus nerve, and this is part of the reason why breathing it works so well, because the vagus nerve goes from like the bottom of your gut to the top of your brain, and it's one nerve that connects everything, and a million signals go up and down this nerve all day, every day. And so by activating that, you help to bring down the system. And so cold showers do that. You can activate your vagus nerve that way. Humming can do that. And there's tons and tons of resources out there on the vagus nerve, but it's a really powerful thing to help calm down your nervous system. That's the word I was looking for, the nervous system. So that's some stuff. When you working on like that deep breathing, when you're in a call, whether that's on the radio or a 911 call, like taking those conscious deep breaths, like maybe even if it's like you put a sticky on your one of your screens that says keep breathing, like deep breaths, just to remind you as a visual, like, oh, I'm not breathing. Like, I mean, there are so many things that you can do. So that's just practical, like in the moment. But also, what you eat. We talk about nutrition. Oh yeah, we need to work out and eat right, right. But what does that even mean? Like, I'm putting together a training on what nutrition actually means, and not from a calorie deficit or calorie counting, but that's awesome. The Apple Pencil. That's good
Yeah,
stuff.
I like
Um,
that.
Erica, you're great. The so what does nutrition actually mean? I'm working on a training on that because nutrition really impacts the stressors in our body. So nutrition plays a role in our hidden stressors, which we didn't talk about today, but that's a huge part of the training that I do is unpacking our vital functions and what stresses our vital functions out, like hormones, our immune system, digestion, detoxification pathways, our energy production, and our brain function. There are different things that stress out those functions, those vital functions. And nutrition is actually one of them. So, for example, one of the labs that I run is called the MRT Food Sensitivities Lab. And with that lab, it looks at the immune system activation for food, for 170 different foods, chemicals, and spices. So, for example, for me, I always fought with food and I didn't understand why. I'd have gas, bloating, indigestion, all that shit. And I never understood why. Like, my weight would fluctuate. I just never understood why. And I took this MRT, and it was the first time in my life that I stopped fighting with food. And food actually became my friend because I understood what my individual body was reacting to. So, for example, I'm highly reactive to peanuts and strawberries. Peanuts wasn't a big deal. I never ate peanuts. I never liked them. Now I understood why, right? So I intuited that I didn't want peanuts. It didn't make me feel good. But then here I am eating strawberries thinking that I'm eating healthy, right? But for me, my immune system viewed strawberries as an invader, as a lion coming to get me. And so it was creating stress in my body. And then that cascades into other vital functions. So, what does nutrition even mean? I tell everybody you need to cut out the four baddies: gluten, soy, dairy, and corn. Those are the four things that are extremely stressful to our body, especially when we're already under stress. You cut out gluten, soy, dairy, and corn, and you will immediately decrease your internal stress load. Um,
Well, not
and
just that, the inflammation alone and a lot
yes,
of that, because for
yes,
me, I had an issue as well where I was just my muscles were just aching, my shoulder,
yes.
my neck, just my back, the middle of my back, like different pains. Like if I sat a certain way, it would start to numb up just in
Yeah.
one spot in my back. I'm like, what the hell is going on? And my doctor couldn't even tell me, could not even say, was like, oh, we just need to send you to physical therapy. So then I started looking at a lot of the symptoms, and a good friend of mine who had gone to a holistic doctor was telling me a few other things, and I came to the conclusion, my conclusion, because I was doing my own research, that it was
Yes.
possibly some sort of candida issue. And
Ah,
all of this,
Candida is a sneaky bastard.
oh my gosh, yes. So I did my own detox, which was well, just reading a lot of stuff as well, a lot of research, and it was cutting out dairy, and I'm lactose intolerant anyway, so my dumbass shouldn't have dairy, but I'm stupid and I love cheese, so I'll eat cheese every
Right.
now and then. But
I feel that.
dairy, gluten, and sugar, and
Yes.
like I could eat vegetables, but not the starchy vegetables, and
Yes.
but no fruit either, because of the natural sugars that's in it. So I did this like hardcore detox for, I don't know, like 6 weeks or something like that, and I kept
Mhm.
it going for a while. But all of those pains, everything gone,
Yeah.
because a lot of
Yes.
that was inflammation that was, like,
Yes.
squeezing certain things. And here's the weird
Yes.
thing, is that once everything cleared up, I
Mhm.
started adding things back in slowly to see what
Mhm.
was affecting me, and then I would
Yep.
be like, "Oh, okay, so that's affecting me a certain way, so let's take that out, or, bring that into the body at a minimum." And it felt almost like my blood was able to actually flow through
Yes.
my body in the areas where it
Yes.
hurt, and it was completely different. It was the most odd thing, and every now and then I'll slip back into some bullshit. I'm like, okay, you don't want to go that far. got to take some of that stuff back out. But it was also just, kind of going back and forth on my own and trying to figure these things for my own body and for my own mental health, because it was screwing me
Yes.
up. Like, why is this affecting me? And how are doctors not able to help me with this? And it was a long process, but once you get to that point, it helps in so
Yeah.
many different ways. You'll feel
Yes.
amazing.
Yes. Yes. And, I talk to a lot of people who they get really frustrated. I actually, just before we jumped onto this, I was
Mhm.
talking to a mama bear who's getting kind of frustrated with, she's got an 11-year-old who's really got some really intense stuff, complicated stuff going on. And she's like, I just feel like there has to be more to the story than this.
Mhm.
And just frustration that our traditional doctors are not able to answer the questions and give satisfactory answers. And I was explaining to her, as I explained to most people, that our doctors are really not trained to look at the body as a whole unit. They're trained to be experts in one specific thing. And so when something is stressing out your gut, it doesn't necessarily people don't think that that the symptom of your migraines are connected to what's happening in your gut, or the symptom of your acne is connected to your gut. But in reality, those are two primary culprits, or two primary symptoms that are often connected to your gut. So it's
Kombucha. People give
yeah,
me shit because I drink kombucha. Let me
kombucha
tell
is
you,
great.
kombucha helps with your gut health, and
It
the gut
does.
health, your gut, like you were saying, your gut can be either helping you in a lot of ways, or it can be the
Mhm.
cause of certain things because
Yes.
your gut health is shit. So,
Yes. I do a whole
kombucha.
training on gut health. But do you want to know why kombucha is good for your gut? Why it
Tell me.
helps?
Tell us.
So kombucha is known as a prebiotic. So
Mhm.
it feeds the good bacteria in your gut, and it gets them all stirred up and gets them really excited to do their jobs. And so we are basically run on bacteria. And so we want them to be excited to do their jobs, because they create our neurotransmitters, they create hormones, they create our immune system. We want a good, healthy, diverse, happy bacteria, and kombucha is fermented foods in general are very good for getting them excited.
Yeah, and especially now because there's a lot of different companies that do it. I mean, the flavors in the beginning, the
Yeah.
flavors weren't the greatest. I mean,
No.
I liked it myself, but damn it, now there's a lot of different companies and a lot of different flavors, and dude, I like it. I dig it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
You
good
have to
ones
be
out there.
careful. You have to be careful that you're actually choosing a truly prebiotic kombucha.
Right,
Um,
because
so
there's a
not
lot of them that are just full of sugar and a bunch of other stuff.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
do
That
your
are they're just
research.
crap.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Looking at, some of the, self-care, so I had put something out
Hmm.
into the audience asking,
I
"What
saw.
do you do?" And, so Rachel here says, "I listen to music, take long drives with no time frame," which is always awesome,
I do that
"or
too.
destination with music blaring and massages. If you can, please definitely go get a massage or anything like that." So a couple things here really quick as we're going into the wrap up of this.
Yeah.
I when I got out of dispatch, it was probably about a week or two after my everything started catching up to me, because when you're on the go all the time, you're just simply that, on
Yes.
the go,
Yep.
and you don't feel anything. It's basically
No.
like that adrenaline rush. You
Yes.
see in movies or in the news or whatever, people who have injuries or something, you're like, "Why are they
Yep.
not feeling it?" And it's because of that
Yes.
adrenaline ruch, right?
Yes.
So when you
They're
finally
in that
slow
acute
down.
stage. They're in
Yes,
that acute stage. They don't know that they're being physically attacked, because
right.
your body actually also releases inflammatory markers to protect. Yeah, that's
So
why.
then so then
You don't
also
feel
so
it.
in dispatch, you're just going and going and going,
Yes.
and you don't feel or deal with a lot
Yes.
of that stuff that's going on. So now 2 weeks out of dispatch, and everything is starting to catch up to me. Like, I felt like I was falling apart. And
Yes.
the amount of pain that I had in my neck and my shoulders and my back, I was like, "Hell no." I was like, "Really? Like, this is happening now?" Because now that I finally slowed down, everything
Mhm.
was starting to come up. So I go to the chiropractor. They give me an X-ray, and the doctor says, I want you to come and look at this. I was like, okay. And he goes, so when you were in dispatch, did you guys wear headsets? And I said, well, yeah, but my headset didn't always work. And I said, so I would. And as I was going to finish my sentence, he goes, you were like this? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, look at your x-ray. I shit you not. I wish I
Mhm.
had a picture of it. But in
Yeah.
my x-ray, I was standing like that.
Uh-huh.
So
Yes.
he was like, you need to come here like every other day for the next
Yeah.
couple weeks. And
Yeah.
I was able to do that. And through
Yeah.
doing, more yoga and all this other stuff, I was able to come back from it. But you've got that adrenaline going and everything, and we don't pay attention to it, which is
Mhm.
why it is good that we're having these conversations so
Yes.
that people
And to
can look
answer
into it.
Yes, and Rachel, your question, yes, that is a primary reason why so many first responders pass away within 5 to 10 years after retiring. Their bodies really are an overload. They can't handle, like, when you stop, everything that you've been running from smacks you on your ass, and if you're not equipped, if you haven't been doing things along the way back here to prepare for that finish, yeah, it's gonna whammy you.
It's a
That's a
it's a
great question.
Yes, very, very good. And damn, this has been a good round. This has been
Been
an
super
excellent round.
fun.
Yes, this has been good. Thank you, all of you who've been here, watching and listening. Again, this is going to be an episode that I end up putting out on the flagship show Within the Trenches podcast, because this is stuff that people need to really think about, and
Yes.
especially for themselves, because we're always thinking about everyone else and not ourselves. So this is definitely something that's going to be going out there. But also, how can people find out more about you, Sarah? What it is that you're doing? Your
Yes.
website, you've got an app. How can people find out more about this stuff?
So,
You're so excited. You're like,
I am, because I love I first of all, I am a highly relational. Anybody who knows me knows that. I will choose relationship over just about everything else all the time. And so I love connecting. I really do love to hear your stories and to see where and how I can support you in your healing journey. And oh, Natalia, hi. I recognize your name. Um uh Yes. So find me. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook. I'm more active on Facebook than I am Instagram. Instagram is usually a little bit more my personal side of things, but um, so those are our spots. I have a website, thinlineconsulting.org. You can learn more about my story and what I offer in services there. I do three things that I spend my time doing. I do one-on-one coaching. I do trainings, and I run my app. So I just recently created the Phoenix Vitality. It's a health and wellness app for helpers, and it's designed with you in mind. So it's designed with it is $15 a month, because I believe in accountability, and I believe in you. It's you taking a step forward in your health, and then you get as much as you put into it. You get out of it as much as you put into it. But within this application for your phone, right? Because we're connected to our phones way more than we are able to jump onto a computer. So you're going to be able to ask anonymous questions. You'll have access to my blog posts that are not published. So it's my kind of ramblings of the things that I'm learning and the answers to questions. There's a forum in there. You get a discount on supplements, and then I give you some information to make some recommendations around specific supplements for you. So it's a really great opportunity to take a next step in your healing journey. And I really did create this app as a practical way for you on the front lines to have access to real meaningful health and wellness experiences and knowledge. So I'm not tracking your heart rate. I'm not counting your steps, which there's plenty of other apps to do that. I'm not going to do meditation. There are other apps for that. This is just for you to learn about tips and tricks on how to stay healthy on the front lines. So that's where I would love to connect with you. I'm also a strategic partner with Motivations Inc. And so I do a lot of training as well. So everything that we talked about today, I can actually bring to your center, and we can unpack this stuff for your staff in a meaningful way that is specific to you and your environment. And so I am starting to book out my trainings. I'm starting to ramp up that side of my business because I see the need for it. So, and I'm really starting to dial my attention onto you guys. So, if you want to bring me out, reach out to me via my website. My phone number is also on my website, so you can text me, you can call me, you can message me on Facebook. I am very accessible because I have done my work and have very good boundaries. So I have very healthy boundaries around my technology. And so you reach out to me when and where you want to, and then I will respond as soon as I can. So that's in a nutshell, those are the way, really, my website. And then definitely check out Phoenix Vitality. It's an amazing resource that I'm creating for you that is designed with you in mind. So
Awesome. That is excellent, and congratulations just on everything and
thanks.
all this stuff that's coming out and stuff, and just this conversation alone. This has been excellent. So thank you again so much for being on.
Absolutely. And then Amber, I'll just snap you later.
I will. I'll be right back here with you in just one moment. And for those who are watching and listening, if you have any comments, questions, or you want to be a guest on the show, or you have a topic that you would like shared on the Dispatchers Roundtable, you can hit us up, and that's going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, that is wttpodcast@gmail.com. This episode has been sponsored by InDigital as well as Carbine, and shout out to patrons. As always, a perk for patrons is all the time now audio versions of the DRT as well as Open Mic Live. But for this specific episode, it's going to end up going out on the flagship show as well, Within the Trenches podcast. Also, if you're looking for any bonus content and you want to help support us, you can check us out, and that's going to be patreon.com/WTT podcast. And this can be seen on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, as well as Twitter. And then for the flagship show Within the Trenches podcast, you can listen 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. Have a good one, everyone, and we'll see you in the next one. If you have a presentation at all that you would like to submit for Dare to Be Great 4, today is the last day, yo. It's just today. And there are tons of submissions. I am so incredibly excited for this fourth Dare to Be Great. Era of the headset is strong, and it is going to be amazing. It's going to be the first full week of December 5th through the 8th. And if you are an industry partner who would like to sponsor this amazing event that has had over 10,000 attendees worldwide just for Dare to Be Great alone, you can check us out as well and email us at wttpodcast@gmail.com. Again, have a good one, everyone. We'll see you in the next one.